Another York County township is preparing to allow data centers. Seriously? I think communities across the country are moving way too fast on these projects without seriously thinking through the long term consequences. Because apparently, if you say the words AI and economic development, local governments are just supposed to stop asking questions. Codorus Township is holding a zoning hearing on June 9th to discuss allowing data centers in commercial zones. And if you live there or honestly anywhere nearby, you should probably pay attention because this stuff matters way more than people realize. These aren't just office buildings. These are massive industrial scale facilities that consume enormous amounts of electricity, water, land, and infrastructure. And we're approving them while people are already complaining about electric rates, aging infrastructure, grid reliability, disappearing farmland, and housing shortages. But sure, let's add giant AI server warehouses into the mix and hope everything magically works itself out. One of the biggest concerns is electricity demand. These facilities use staggering amounts of power, especially AI-focused data centers. And people need to stop pretending this electricity just appears out of thin air. We're literally seeing discussions around restarting 3 Mile Island. Actually, it's already happening, largely because of exploding data center demand. Think about how insane that is for a second. TMI used to generate enough electricity for hundreds of thousands of homes. Now we're talking about enormous amounts of energy increasingly being redirected toward private AI infrastructure. And before somebody jumps in with, well, if they restart generation, doesn't that solve the problem? Not necessarily, because somebody still pays for transmission upgrades, somebody still pays for infrastructure expansion, somebody still deals with grid strain. And historically, utility companies are not exactly famous for lowering your bills out of generosity. Residents should be asking what this means long-term for electric rates, especially because a lot of these facilities are plugging into infrastructure communities already rely on. And then there's water usage. This is another area where the messaging gets really slippery. Companies love saying, we use closed-loop cooling systems. Okay, closed loop does not mean no water usage. It means the system recirculates water. It still requires draining, maintenance, replacement cycles, evaporation management. Water is still being consumed. And communities deserve honest numbers instead of vague corporate PR language designed to make people stop asking questions. Then there's the land issue. We constantly hear there's not enough housing. We need more inventory. Homes are too expensive. Farmland is disappearing. And then communities turn around and improve huge developments that can consume massive amounts of land while creating relatively few permanent jobs. That should not be controversial to question, because once farmland and wooded areas are gone, they're usually gone forever. And let's talk about the jobs argument for a second. People hear billion-dollar investment and imagine massive employment opportunities. But a lot of these facilities are heavily automated once operational. So communities can end up giving tax incentives, infrastructure accommodations, zoning changes, and utility support for what sometimes amounts to surprisingly limited long-term local employment. Part of why this is happening so aggressively right now is because there's a massive national push to build these facilities before certain federal tax incentives and bonus depreciation structures begin changing. There's enormous pressure to get projects online before 2030. That's one reason proposals are suddenly exploding all over the country. This isn't random. There's an AI arms race happening right now, and demand has become so insane that critical electrical components necessary for these projects are massively backlogged. Some companies are reportedly paying millions of dollars just for a spot in line to purchase certain equipment. Not even the equipment itself, just the opportunity to buy it later. That is how aggressive this expansion has become, which should maybe make local residents stop and ask, why is everybody suddenly in such a hurry? And are local governments actually prepared for the long-term consequences before rewriting zoning laws? Because once these projects get approved and built, communities usually cannot just reverse course later. And honestly, this is why local government matters so much. People ignore township meetings, they ignore zoning hearings, they ignore planning commissions, because they think nothing important happens there. Meanwhile, billion-dollar corporations are reshaping the future of communities in rooms with like 14 people attending. This is where your community changes. Not Facebook arguments, national politics, township meetings, zoning hearings, planning decisions. That's where it happens. So if you live in Codorus Township or nearby areas, show up on June 9th. Even if you support the project, ask questions, demand specifics, because residents deserve transparency before decisions with decades-long consequences get approved.